It cuts deep when you finally see your own family for what they are, people who measure your worth by how much trouble you cause them. I was doubled over, fighting the pain just to stay on my feet when my daughter snapped at me. "We are not your nurses, Dad." Her husband was standing right behind her, arms folded across his chest, nodding, like I had asked them to drag me up a mountain instead of just give me the bathroom. In that moment, they thought they were excusing themselves from any duty to me. What they did not understand was that they had just awakened a side of me they had never seen, the resolve of a father who has been pushed too far. Before we continue, please subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. The painkillers made my head feel like I was moving through mud, but their voices still cut through clear and sharp, like cold water down my back. I had been out of the hospital less than a full day, 18 hours to be exact, and I was still in the same discharge clothes because bending over to change felt like someone ripping me in half. "Emily, all I need is a hand getting to the shower," I said, gripping the side of my recliner for balance. That same chair where I used to cradle her as a baby, where I read her bedtime stories, where I sat waiting for her to come home from dates. The question pressed in hard. How did it come to this? She stood there in my living room, the one I had broken my back working overtime to pay for, with her arms folded and that look on her face, the one that meant I was the problem for having needs at all. "This is my house," I reminded myself, watching the way she glanced over at Mike. My house that I had let them stay in for 3 years. "Dad, you're being dramatic," she said. I felt a chill move through me. "It's only a shower. You can handle it yourself." Mike, standing behind her, nodded along like one of those dashboard bobbleheads. "We have things to do today. Important things. Important things." I nearly laughed, but the pain in my Staniela kept me from it. Their so-called important things usually meant spending money they had not earned, while I kept covering their rent, their food, even their car insurance. I pushed myself up straighter despite the fire ripping through my abdomen. "I'm not asking you to climb a mountain. I'm asking for 10 minutes of help. From my own family." The silence that followed stretched out wide. The ticking of the kitchen clock filled the space. The same clock that had counted down through Emily's tantrums, her teenage fights, her failed college attempts that I had bailed her out of. My mind slipped back to that first talk when they moved in. "Just until we get back on our feet, Dad. You're saving us." That was 3 years ago. 36 months of draining my retirement, coming home to find them sprawled on the couch while I worked overtime to keep all of us afloat. "Dad," Emily's voice snapped me back, sharp and dismissive. "This isn't a nursing home. You knew you had surgery coming up. You should have planned for this." Planned for this. My chest tightened. Like asking my own daughter, who had lived rent-free under my roof for 3 years, to help me bathe was too much to ask. "What arrangements, Emily?" My voice came out harsher than I meant. "I raised you. I gave you this roof, this food, covered your bills for 3 years straight, and now I am asking you for 1 week of basic kindness." Mike finally chimed in, his tone dripping with that smug superiority that always made me grit my teeth. "That's emotional manipulation, and we're not going to play along." Emotional manipulation. I stared at him. This man who had eaten every meal from my fridge, slept in my home, lived off my internet while pretending to look for jobs. And I felt something deep inside shift. Something I had been holding back for months finally surfaced, steady, cold. "You know what?" I said softly, sinking back into my recliner. "You're right. You're absolutely right." They blinked, caught off guard. For a second, I could see relief in their faces. They thought I was giving up. They thought they had won. But they could not have been more wrong. They had no clue what I was actually agreeing to. I was not finished, not by a long shot. A man reaches a point where he has to put every card down on the table just to see if anyone's even been watching the game. "You want to talk about emotional manipulation?" I asked, my voice steady even though pain was cutting across my ribs like a knife. "Fine. Let's talk about the real manipulation that's been going on under this roof." Emily rolled her eyes and muttered, "Here we go. Here we go." Like my life, my sacrifices, were just some story she had to sit through again. My pulse hammered in my temples, but my thoughts were sharper than they had been in months. The car insurance I've been paying for 3 years while Mike looked for work, $480 every month. Was that manipulation? Or was that just dad being taken for granted? My voice gained strength. The groceries, the lights, the credit cards I covered when you two decided to head off to Miami last Christmas. $2,300 for a weekend getaway? Was that me twisting your arm too? Mike shifted in place. That was different. That was what? I snapped, cutting him short. The edge in my tone made them both freeze. Family helping family? Love? Because that's all I thought I was asking for today. My mind flicked back to that December morning, staring at the statement. $2,347.82 in hotels, flights, and restaurants, while I ate canned soup to keep the lights on. When I asked, Emily had cried, said they needed time away to save their marriage, said I should be glad they were working on their relationship. Dad, we appreciate everything you've done, but Emily started with that practiced, sugar-coated tone she had mastered over the years. But nothing. The words came out like a rifle crack. Don't you dare throw around the word appreciation while telling me you can't give me 10 minutes to help me wash myself after surgery. The room went silent. Even the clock on the wall seemed to hold its breath. I forced myself upright from the chair, fire ripping across my S. Danielak. You want to see emotional manipulation? It's living rent-free for 3 years while making the man feeding you feel guilty for asking the smallest favor. It's taking $1,700 a month in rent, utilities, food, and insurance, then calling him manipulative when he finally asks for something back. $1,700 every month. I did the math in my head. $61,200 over 3 years. Add in the loans that turned into gifts, the credit cards I paid off, and all the rest piled high. Mike's cheeks turned red. We never asked to live here. That lie hit harder than the surgery ever had. I could still see it like yesterday, Emily bawling at my kitchen table, Mike hovering behind her, too ashamed to look me in the eye. They had been evicted. They had nowhere else to go. Nobody but me. Is that so? My voice dropped low, almost a whisper. Because I remember it another way. I remember you both begging me in this very room, begging me to let you stay just until you got back on your feet. I remember saying yes, like I always did, because that is who I am. The quiet between us felt like a battlefield, and in their faces I saw it, the crack of shame or maybe fear. They were realizing this fight was not theirs to win. Well then, I said, lowering myself back into the chair with slow, half-deliberate calm. Congratulations, you are back on your feet, and now you can use them to walk out of my house. The words hung heavy like smoke after a gunshot. Emily's jaw dropped. Mike looked stunned, like I had just slapped him across the face. Dad, you do not mean that, Emily whispered, but I did. For the first time in 3 years, I meant every word exactly as I said it. The quiet that settled in after they walked out was not the kind of silence that brings peace. It felt heavy, like the air right before a storm lets loose. I was still planted in that same recliner, still in the wrinkled clothes I had left the hospital in, still unwashed from the day before. Funny, I thought. Here I was, trying to piece together some grand strategy, and I could not even manage to scrub my own hair. Maybe that was the root of it. I had spent so long being the man everyone counted on, I had forgotten how to stand on my own. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily. Dad, we didn't mean it. Let's talk in Oro when everyone's calmer. I just stared at the screen until it dimmed, catching a faint glimpse of my reflection. Wild gray hair sticking out, 3 days of beard, surgical tape poking through my shirt. I looked exactly like what I had become, a man waiting around for somebody else to take care of him. When's the last time you did something for yourself? The question hit hard. When was the last time I had gone anywhere on my own? Made a choice without thinking about how Emily or Mike would react. When was the last time I sat down to dinner without leaving a pile of cash on the counter for groceries I would never see? Enough. I hauled myself out of the chair, my abdomen screaming in protest. If I was going to get my head straight, I had to start with the basics. I needed that shower. The bathroom mirror showed me a stranger. Not the father who had carried Emily through childhood, not the man who had always come up with answers. Just a 61-year-old who had forgotten how to look after himself. You managed fine before them, I reminded myself, letting the water run until it warmed. You bought this house, you built a life, you raised your daughter, you can handle washing your own back. It was clumsy, it hurt, it took forever. But 20 minutes later, I had showered without anyone hovering, without anyone sighing like I was a burden. So this is independence, I thought as I dried off carefully around the bandages. Not easy, not quick, but mine. And then it hit me. The breakthrough wasn't about them at all. It was about me. For 3 years, I had trained them to rely on me. But just as bad, I had trained myself to rely on being needed. Every rent payment, every crisis solved, every mess I cleaned up, it fed that part of me that could not stand to feel unnecessary. Maybe the problem isn't that they won't let go, I realized, pulling on clean clothes for the first time in days. Maybe the problem is that I don't know who I am without their problems to solve. My phone rang. Emily's name lit up the screen. I looked at it for a long moment. For 3 years, I would have answered before the second ring, ready to hear her excuses, her apologies, or the next emergency she wanted me to fix. But this time, I let it ring. And in that small refusal, in that act of silence, I felt something I had not felt in years. Choice. Pure, raw, uncomfortable choice. They do not actually need me, I realized with perfect clarity. They need what I provide. My house, my bank account, my habit of fixing everything. But me? No, the ringing stopped, then started again. I powered the phone off and set it down. If they want to fix this, I thought, looking around the quiet house with new eyes, they can start by learning how to live one single day without me carrying them. It was a small rebellion. But maybe revolutions do not start with fireworks. Maybe sometimes they begin with something as ordinary as taking your first shower on your own. By the time the sun came up the next morning, my phone showed 14 missed calls and 23 unread messages. I knew the count because I had turned the thing on just long enough to glance at the numbers before shutting it back down again. 14 calls in half a day, I thought, bracing myself against the kitchen counter as a sharp wave of post-surgery pain ripped across my abdomen. That shower had taken more out of me than I wanted to admit. Every move still tugged at the stitches, but I was clean. And that counted for something. The irony made me almost smile. When I was available, when I was dependable, always ready to bail them out, I might as well have been invisible. The second I made myself unreachable, suddenly I became the most important man in their world. I was easing myself down into a chair. God, everything still hurt when I heard the front door unlock. Their key, I realized. The one I had given them for emergencies that had slowly turned into their all-access pass to my life. Dad? Emily's voice rang through the hallway, carrying that brand of concern she pulled out whenever she wanted something. Dad, are you okay? You're not picking up your phone. I kept sipping my coffee, careful with each movement so I would not pull at the incision. My hallway, I thought, as their footsteps came closer. When did I stop calling this my house? Dad, we know you're home. Your car's in the driveway, Mike added, his fake worry slipping just enough to show the irritation underneath. They stepped into the kitchen, and I watched their faces shift when they saw me, clean, dressed, and sitting upright with my own coffee, even if I was clearly still hurting. Jesus, Dad, you look awful, Emily said, rushing forward. You shouldn't be moving around like this. Now she cares about my recovery, I thought. Only it did not feel real. It felt staged, like she was trying out for the part of loving daughter in a play no one had asked her to perform. I'm fine, I answered, flat as stone. Mike stepped in, his face rearranged into that fake problem-solving look. Listen, about yesterday, we talked it over. We crossed a line. We want to set things right. Make things right. Those words dropped heavy between us. Yesterday, I might have grabbed them like a life raft. Today, they just sounded like a strategy. Emily slid into the chair across from me, no invitation asked. We've been thinking, she said quickly. Maybe we overreacted. You're right. Family is supposed to take care of each other. I studied her, noting every little tell. The way her eyes would not hold mine, the restless flick of her hands, energy that had nothing to do with worry over my health. Interesting time for that realization, I said. What's that supposed to mean? Her voice went up half an octave, the same way it always did when she was lying. I pushed myself to my feet slowly, ignoring the stabbing pain, and walked to the kitchen counter where I always sorted my mail. Yesterday, when I came home from the hospital, there was a letter waiting here from my investment firm. I was too weak to look at it then. I figured I'd read it today. I scanned the counter. Empty. Funny thing is, I can't find it now. The silence that followed had a weight of its own. I could almost hear their pulse quicken. Dad, we didn't see any letter, Emily said, but her eyes stayed fixed anywhere but on me. Liar. The word burned in the back of my throat, but I kept my voice even. Really? Because I remember it clear as day. White envelope. Peterson Financial Group in the return address. I set it right here by the salt shaker. Mike cleared his throat. Maybe it slipped? Got mixed up with something else? I turned to face them fully, letting the quiet stretch until it hurt. 3 years of carrying these two, and I had never really seen them the way I saw them now. Calculating, watchful, faces tight with secrets. You know what I think? I asked softly. They froze like deer in headlights. I think somebody got curious. Maybe wanted to know if their free ride was about to get shorter, or if they might get lucky and it was about to get longer. Emily's face crumpled into sudden tears. Dad, how could you even say that? We came because we were worried about you, and now you're accusing us of... Of what, Emily? I cut her off, my tone harder than it had ever been with her. Tell me, what exactly do you think I'm accusing you of? And just like that, the tears stopped, snuffed out as quick as they had started. That was all the confirmation I needed. The sudden concern, the soft apologies, the rush to help, it all traced back to that missing envelope. Where's my mail? I asked, every word sharp and cold. Mike's hand moved instinctively toward his jacket pocket. Quick, unthinking. But I caught it, and in that second, I understood the truth. I finally saw what kind of people I had been keeping afloat for 3 long years. Empty your pockets, I said. Dad, this is ridiculous, Emily started. Ridiculous. That word hit me harder than any slap. After everything I had carried for her, asking for honesty was now ridiculous. Heat surged in my chest, mixing with the dull, gnawing ache from my stitches. Empty your pockets. The silence stretched tight, like a rubber band about to snap. Mike's face had gone pale, his hands still hovering near his jacket. A vein pulsed in his temple, the same way it always did whenever I cornered him about unemployment checks or the gambling debts he swore he did not have. Look at him sweat, I thought, cold satisfaction cutting through the pain. 3 years of treating me like their personal cash machine, and now they were the ones cornered. I said empty them, I repeated, my voice low and steady, more dangerous than a shout. Mike's hands shook as he reached into his jacket and pulled out a crumpled white envelope. My name and address were clear as day, the Peterson Financial Group logo stamped in the corner. The envelope had been ripped open, sloppy and rushed, not the neat slit I always made with a letter opener. My mail, in his pocket. It felt like a knife twisting inside me, sharper than any surgical pain. I held out my hand. Not a word. Just waited. He dropped it into my palm like evidence at a crime scene. Inside was exactly what I feared, a notice that my mother's estate had been settled. $68,000 set to hit my account within 5 business days. Money I had never told them about. Money that belonged to my grief, my memories, not their sticky fingers. How long have you been opening my mail? I asked, eyes still on the letter. Dad, it's not what you think. Emily's voice was small now, the bravado gone. Not what I think? Then explain why my private correspondence was in her husband's pocket. My heart thudded against my ribs, each beat sending fire through my abdomen. How long? Mike cleared his throat. Sometimes if we're around and mail comes, we might glance. Glance? I cut in, sharp. Like glancing at someone's diary? Like accidentally stumbling into their medical records? I stared at them both. 3 years? The entire time you've lived here, you've been tearing through my mail. The shame on their faces told me the truth before either of them spoke. Jesus Christ. The surgical pain was nothing compared to this. They had not just leaned on me. They had been spying on me. Reading my statements, my health records, my private letters, every doctor's visit I mentioned, every bill I stressed over, every detail of my life I thought was mine alone. They had been logging it all like spies gathering intelligence on their mark. What else have you read? I asked quietly. They looked at each other, and I caught something flicker in Emily's expression. There was more. Of course there was more. What else? I demanded. Dad, please, just let us explain, Emily began. Explain? More lies, more half-truths wrapped in sugar. My hands were shaking now, whether from rage or pain, I could not even tell. The life insurance, Mike blurted, his words tumbling out fast. We saw the updates you made before your surgery. My S. Danielak dropped. The life insurance. The one I had adjusted when I scheduled the operation, just trying to be responsible. The one that named Emily as my primary beneficiary. They knew exactly what I was worth. Not alive. Dead. $500,000. That is what I was worth to them if I stopped breathing. More than I had ever been worth living. So yesterday, I said, my voice steady even though my hands trembled, when you told me you weren't my caretakers, when you called me manipulative, when you refused to help me shower, you already knew. You knew about the inheritance. You knew about the insurance. Dad, it's not. Emily tried again. It's not what? Not calculated? Not cold? Not the kind of thing that makes a father look at his daughter and wonder if she sees him as a paycheck with a pulse? You knew I was worth more to you dead than alive, I continued. And still, you couldn't spare 10 minutes to help me wash my hair. The kitchen went silent. My own breathing was the only sound, heavy and ragged. I looked at Emily's tear-streaked face, my little girl, the one I once taught to ride a bike, who used to fall asleep on my chest during Saturday night movies. And here she was, measuring my value like a bank balance. Get out, I said quietly. Dad, please, let us explain. Explain what? That rifling through my mail for 3 years was somehow love? That memorizing the numbers on my life insurance was just smart planning? Get out! The words ripped out of me so loud they both stumbled back. Pain tore through my stitches, but I did not care. Out of my house, out of my life. Leave now, before I call the police and tell them exactly what you've been doing with my mail. Emily broke down crying, real tears this time. Daddy, please, we love you. Daddy. Now I was Daddy again. Now that the money was real, now that forgiveness meant survival, I was back to Daddy instead of the burden they treated me as yesterday. Love? I barked out a laugh, and even to my own ears it sounded bitter. You love the money. You love the life insurance. You love the inheritance check. But me, the father who raised you, who worked himself raw for you, who would have given you anything if you had just asked? Would have. Past tense. That man no longer existed. I pushed myself to my feet, ignoring the blaze of pain in my side. You couldn't even love me enough to help me wash after surgery. I walked to the kitchen drawer, pulled out the ring of spare keys, and held them up. These are mine. These are mine. My house, my rules, my privacy. From now on, if you want in, you knock like strangers, because that's what you are to me now. Mike finally spoke, his voice tight. Where are we supposed to go? Where are we supposed to go? Not we're sorry, not we'll make this right, just panic over where they'd land once their free ride was cut off. I looked at him, the man who had eaten my food, slept under my roof, opened my mail, and I felt nothing. Not rage, not sadness, nothing. I don't care, I said flatly. You have until tonight to pack your things. Anything left here after that goes in the trash. Dad, you can't just what? I snapped. Can't just stop being your personal bank? Can't expect privacy in my own home? Can't ask for basic decency without being called manipulative? I stepped closer, keys still in my hand. Watch me. They left without another word. I stayed in my chair the rest of the morning, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The silence in the house didn't feel empty. It felt charged, like the air right before lightning splits the sky. 3 years I kept thinking, my eyes drifting to the inheritance letter sitting on the table like a piece of evidence. 3 years of them reading my mail, tracking my accounts, calculating my worth. The pain medicine had started wearing off, leaving me with raw stitches and a mind too sharp to hide behind fog. Maybe that was for the best. Maybe I needed to feel every inch of this. Around noon, the phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID and my S. Danielak dropped. Daniel. Of course, she called my brother. Of course, she got to him first. I let it buzz 3 times before I picked up. Hello, Daniel. Richard? What the hell is going on? His voice came fast, angry. Emily just called me crying, saying you threw her and Mike out. She said you're having some kind of breakdown after surgery. Breakdown. Of course, that's the story. My daughter had always been quick to flip the script, paint herself the victim, make me look unstable. That familiar tightness gripped my chest, the one I'd felt for years whenever anyone doubted me about Emily. Did she now? I asked carefully. She said you accused them of stealing your mail, that you threatened to call the cops. Dick, this is Emily, your daughter. My daughter. The words cut like a blade. Daniel's tone carried that old weight. The suggestion that I was overreacting, that I should just swallow it, because blood forgives everything. Daniel, I said, slow and steady. What exactly did she tell you? She told me you've been paranoid since surgery, that you're imagining things, that you kicked them out over some misunderstanding about a letter. He softened his voice. Dick, I know how recovery can mess with your head. Painkillers, stress. So that's it. He thinks I'm hallucinating, drugged, paranoid, imagining shadows. Anger rose like bile in my throat. She told you I imagined it? I'm not taking sides here, but Dick, these are good kids. They've been looking after you for 3 years. Maybe you misunderstood. Good kids, taking care of me. The same lie I'd been feeding myself, the same story that drained my retirement dry. Daniel, I cut in, voice sharp now. I found my inheritance letter in Mike's jacket pocket, opened, read. Hidden from me. The line went quiet. That's impossible, Daniel said finally. Why would they? $68,000, I said flatly. That's what Mom left me. They knew before I did, because they've been opening my mail. Another stretch of silence. Dick, that doesn't add up. Why would Emily go through your mail? To monitor my money, to track when deposits were coming, to peek at my medical records, my insurance, my bank accounts. My voice grew steadier with each word. Daniel, they know exactly how much my life insurance is worth. This silence was longer, heavy. How much? Daniel asked at last, and I heard something shift in his voice. $500,000. They've known for months. Jesus Christ, Dick. Finally someone heard me. It gets worse. I said, and I told him about yesterday. About being home from surgery less than a day, still raw and hurting, asking my daughter for 10 minutes of help to shower. They refused? Daniel's voice cracked with disbelief. You couldn't even bathe yourself and they refused? They called me manipulative, told me they weren't my caretakers, said I was a burden. The words were sour in my mouth. Daniel, they knew I was worth $500,000 dead, and they still wouldn't help me wash my hair. The silence on the other end was deafening. I could hear his breathing, could almost hear the grinding of his thoughts. This is it, I thought. This is where I find out if my own brother thinks I'm crazy, or if he finally sees the truth. Dick, he said quietly at last, are you telling me they've been reading your private mail for 3 years? Every word. Bank statements, doctor's reports, investment letters, insurance notices, all of it. And they refused to help you shower after surgery? They said it wasn't their job. Another pause. Then Daniel's voice hardened. Scumbags. The word hit me like a wave of relief. Someone believed me. Someone finally understood. Scumbags, he repeated, his tone sharp with anger now. Dick, that's not just low, that's criminal. Opening someone else's mail is a federal crime. I know. And they've been living under your roof, eating your food, using your utilities, driving on insurance you pay. Every bit of it. And all that time they were combing through your private life behind your back, calculating my value like I was a balance sheet. Daniel stayed silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Cold. Solid. Dick, I owe you an apology. When Emily called me, she made it sound like you'd lost your mind, said you were paranoid, irrational. She's good at that, I said. She's been practicing for 3 years. What do you mean? Every time I asked a question about where the grocery money went, why Mike never had a job, why my retirement fund kept shrinking, she turned it around on me. I was paranoid. I was controlling. I was imagining things. Jesus, Dick, I'm sorry. I should have listened instead of assuming. Instead of assuming the sweet little girl you bounced on your lap at Christmas couldn't possibly manipulate her own father? Daniel's voice dropped. Yeah, instead of that. We sat in silence for a moment. I could feel something between us shift, some wall that had stood for years, finally giving way. What are you going to do now? Daniel asked. I looked around my kitchen. My kitchen. Quiet, clean, no one rifling through my mail, no one tallying up my worth. First thing, I'm calling a locksmith, I said. Then I'm calling the bank to strip them from every account they've touched. After that, I'm calling my lawyer to change the will. Change your will? Emily's still my sole beneficiary, I said flatly. $500,000 in life insurance, whatever's left of the estate. After today, she gets nothing. Dick, that's a hell of a step. She read my private mail for 3 years, refused to help me shower after surgery, and decided I was worth more to her dead than alive. It's not a big step, Daniel. It's overdue. Daniel was quiet, then said, "You're right. You're absolutely right. I'm also moving the inheritance money, a separate account, somewhere they'll never find it." What else? I let the answer settle inside me before I said it. That cold, steady clarity felt like armor sliding into place. "I'm going to do something I haven't done in 3 years," I said. "I'm going to live my life without asking permission from people who treat me like a wallet with legs." Good for you? Daniel said, and for the first time in years, I heard real respect in his voice. "It's about damn time." After we hung up, I didn't waste a second. My first call was to a 24-hour locksmith. "I need all the locks changed today," I told them. "Emergency situation." The next call went to the bank. "I want every account reviewed, every authorized user removed immediately." The third call went to my lawyer. "Laura, it's Richard Thompson. I need an emergency appointment to change my will. Today, if possible." The last call was to my investment advisor. "I have inheritance money coming in next week. It goes into a brand new account. Only I get access." By the time I set the phone down, something had taken the place of the anger and the hurt. Something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. I was done being their victim. From now on, I was going to be their consequence. At 2 o'clock sharp, I heard a knock on the door. Not the jingle of a key sliding into the lock, an actual knock. The locksmith had already come and gone, leaving me with new locks and a security I hadn't felt in years. I peered through the peephole. Emily and Mike stood on the porch, and with them was a woman I didn't recognize, holding a neat leather bag. Round two, I thought, that cold satisfaction sliding into my chest. Let's see what they try this time. I opened the door, but didn't step aside. "Dad, this is Patricia," Emily said, voice carefully measured, her eyes still puffy from crying. "She's a family counselor. We thought maybe if we sat with someone neutral." A family counselor. I nearly laughed. Now they wanted professional backup to twist me back into place. "Hello, Mr. Thompson," Patricia said, wearing that gentle, trained smile therapists all seem to master. "I understand there's been a misunderstanding between you and your family." A misunderstanding. That word, again. The same one I'd heard in my head yesterday when I stood alone under the shower and finally saw things clearly. "There's no misunderstanding," I said quietly. "They know exactly what they've done. I know exactly what they've done. The only question left is what I do about it." "Dad, please." Emily took a step forward, and this time the tears looked real, but underneath them I saw something else. Panic. She was starting to realize she'd lost control. "Let us in. Let's talk this through like adults." "Adults don't rip open their father's mail," I said. "Adults don't weigh what their father is worth alive versus dead. Adults don't refuse to help after surgery." Patricia cleared her throat delicately. "Mr. Thompson, I know emotions are raw, but family counseling can rebuild trust when—" "Can it rebuild trust after federal crimes?" I asked, my voice calm, "because opening someone else's mail without permission is mail fraud." That smile slipped from her face. Good. Now she understood what she'd walked into. "Dad, you're not going to call the cops on your own daughter," Mike said, and there was something in his tone that made my spine lock straight. A warning, a threat, in my own doorway. "Try me," I said softly. That's when I caught it, the flicker in Mike's eyes, a hard, mean edge. And I understood in that moment why Emily had married him. They were cut from the same cloth, a perfect team when it came to draining me dry. "You know what, old man?" Mike stepped closer. "You want to play tough? Let's play tough. We've been supporting you too, emotionally, taking care of this place. Emily's been your whole social life for 3 years, supporting me, taking care of this house, my social life." I felt something dangerous stir in my chest. "Supporting me?" I repeated, quiet but sharp. "By rifling through my mail, taking care of my house by living here rent-free, being my social life by cutting me off from everyone else until I had no one but you." And that was the truth of it. They hadn't just wanted my money, they'd wanted my dependence. They wanted me cornered, desperate, theirs. "Face it, Dad," Emily said, her mask slipping at last. "Without us, what do you have? No friends, no hobbies, no life. We are your life." There it was, the truth, not family, not love. Control. I smiled then. The same smile I'd worn when I told Mike to empty his pockets. "You know what?" I said, staring straight at Emily. "You're absolutely right. Without you, I don't have much of a life." Relief flickered across her face. Patricia looked encouraged, like she'd witnessed a breakthrough. Even Mike's shoulders loosened. "But here's the thing," I said, pulling my phone from my pocket. "I spent the afternoon making some changes." I tilted the screen so they could see. Bank of America, account closed. Wells Fargo, authorized users removed. Morrison Law Office, will updated. "I may not have much of a life," I said, stepping back and resting my hand on the door, "but it's mine now, my life, my house, my money." The blood drained from Emily's face. "Dad, what did you do?" "I did what I should have done 3 years ago," I said. "I took back control of my own life." "You can't just cut us off like this." Mike's voice rose, the smooth mask gone at last. "We have rights. Rights." I laughed, the sound sharp as glass breaking. "Rights?" I said. "To my house? To my money? To my private mail? No, the only right you've got is the right to walk off my property before I call the police." "Dad, please," Emily sobbed. But these weren't crocodile tears anymore. These were real. Tears of panic. Fear. We have nowhere to go. And there it was. The truth at the bot Daniel of it all. They hadn't just been bleeding me for cash. They'd built their lives so they couldn't stand without me. "You should have thought about that," I said quietly, "before you decided I was worth more as an ATM than as a father." And then, for the second time in 2 days, I shut the door on them. But this time, I slid the deadbolt into place. This time, they had no key. That evening, sitting in my living room, I heard something I hadn't heard in years. Quiet. Not that sharp, nervous silence of walking on eggshells, but true, steady quiet. I sank into my recliner with a book I'd been meaning to read for months. No interruptions. No one else's noise spilling down the hall. Just me and the sound of my own house breathing. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. Text after text, voicemail after voicemail, all the desperate noise of people pounding on a door they no longer had the key to. Let them. Let them feel what it's like when the net disappears. For 3 years, every one of their problems had been laid at my feet. Lost a job? Dad will cover it. Eviction notice? Dad's got room. Short on cash? Dad's got savings. Curious about how much Dad has left? His mail is sitting right there on the counter. I had trained them to treat me like a resource, not a person. The house felt different now, larger somehow, like the walls had stretched. The kitchen where I could eat on my own schedule. The bathroom where I could shower without eyes and without sighs and how much trouble I was. My space, my choices, my life. I thought about calling Daniel to tell him how the day had ended, but I didn't. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. Didn't need advice. Didn't need anyone's permission. I knew I'd made the right call. I felt it deep in my bones. The inheritance would land next week. $68,000 they'd never touch, never count, never dream over. Daniel Loro, I'd change the life insurance. Daniel would inherit it, someone who'd never once measured my value in dollars. They'd bet everything on the idea that I couldn't live without them. They'd lost. I opened my book and started reading. No one asked for grocery money. No one rolled their eyes at me. No one interrupted. So this is independence, I thought. Not easy, not flashy, just mine. The phone rang again. Emily's name lit up the screen. I looked at it for a long moment, then set it face down on the table. Some lessons, I realized, people only learn the hard way. For 61 years, I thought love meant sacrifice. That being a good father meant being an endless well of forgiveness, money, and patience. That family was something you endured instead of something that gave you strength. I'd been wrong. Real love doesn't rip open your private letters. Real love doesn't sit calculating what you're worth dead versus alive. Real love shows up without complaint when you need help just to stand under a shower. Real love treats you like a person, not like an ATM with legs. The house creaked around me as it settled, peaceful in a way it hadn't been in years. No footsteps on the stairs from people scheming in whispers. No hushed conversations about my health and what it might mean for their bank accounts. Just the sound of a man, finally alone in his own home. I read until my eyes grew heavy, marked my place, turned off the lamp. On the way upstairs, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked different, not younger, but clearer, like fog had burned off. I'd spent 3 years apologizing for existing in my own house. Tonight, I existed without apology. As I pulled the covers over me in my own bed, one final thought settled in. They'd taught me the most valuable lesson I'd ever learn, without even meaning to. They taught me that sometimes the most loving act you can do is stop enabling people at their worst. They taught me that my worth was never measured by what I could provide. And starting Daniel Oro, I would finally learn who I was when I wasn't busy being someone else's solution. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. And as always, thank you for watching.